Welcome back to Deck Check, where you better check yourself before you deck yourself. We are so excited to have you back for the 17th episode of the Off Meta podcast. I'm Ganesh.
And I'm Samurai Dancer. Today we are chowing down on some duck and steak with Surf and Turf Malcolm Bruce. Welcome to the Off Meta podcast where the brews that are hot shoot their shot.
In this show, we focus on the fascinating off meta cEDH decks people haven't seen yet, like the wonderful partner pairing of Malcolm Eyed Navigator and Bruse Tarl Boorish Herder. These names just aren't getting shorter, man. We'll have a fresh new episode every Friday by 6 p.m. Central.
Off Meta is not responsible for the tournament results of decks and cards mentioned on Off Meta. If there's like us to take a look at, or you'd like to appear in the show itself, just let us know in the Discord or in the comments down below.
If you like this sort of content, remember to like and subscribe, maybe send this to your friends. And this week, instead of the news, we have a fun announcement/reminder to make.
We will be having a free online Pride cEDH tournament on August 10th.
You can use any combination of two cards that could legally be your commander and partner them together. This includes legendary creatures, backgrounds, and planeswalkers that say can be your commander.
For example, and Dahada Biner Wills, or Street Urchin and Tevish Zot Doom of Fools.
With about $80 in total prize support for the top 4 players, our Pride-themed pricing is a Sliver Overlord Secret Lair foil, worth about $60, a Diabolic Intent borderless foil, worth about $10, a Forbidden Orchard borderless, which is about $7, and a Rainbow Command Tower borderless foil, which is about $3.
You will also get a special Discord role if you make top 4 or top 10, depending on the cutoff. So go ahead and register.
Yes, and without further ado, let's hop into Malcolm Bruce. Are you ready to take your cEDH gameplay to the next level? Join my coaching program and learn from a proven champion. With many tournament wins, I offer personalized coaching tailored to your deck and goals. Enjoy ongoing support, gameplay reviews, practice games, and individual or group lessons. Don't just compete, conquer. You can contact me anytime through the Discord link below. All right, we're here with Conartistry and Malcolm Eyed Navigator plus Bruse Tarl Boorish Herder, or as you call it in the title, Surf and Turf. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been playing, your favorite decks, your location, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing off and on since the original Theros block.
Mhm.
Don't ask me how long ago that was anymore. I honestly don't remember. But my favorite decks would have to be probably this and just different versions of Storm throughout the years. And then for my general location, I mostly play on the East Coast.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I definitely know some people on the general East Coast. Like I know Chaos is from there and a bunch of people.
Yeah, I'm always surprised to find how many people are actually playing from the East Coast and around me.
Yeah,
Like, I never expected it
Dracomancers
to be
out
that big.
there. A lot of people. Anyway, enough about the East Coast. Yeah, so have you taken this deck to any tournaments? And if so, have you done?
I've mostly just brought it to locals, but bringing it there so far, I've at least top 10 the past 3 events, and I won
Okay.
the second one.
Nice. Okay. How big was your local?
Between 24 and I believe 48 people.
Oh, that's actually not bad then. Yeah, very good. Cool. So I guess before we get too deep into it, would you like to tell us what these two commanders actually do? Like maybe read aloud their abilities and all that?
Sure. So the highlight of the deck is, of course, Malcolm Eyed Navigator. He's 2 and a blue for a legendary Siren Pirate. It's a 2/2 with flying, and whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure for each opponent dealt damage. And then the partner is Bruse Tarl, Boorish Herder, who's 2 a red and a white for a 3/3 with whenever Bruse Tarl enters the battlefield or attacks, target creature you control gains double strike and lifelink until end of turn. There's a really fun synergy out of that where if you give Malcolm double strike, you'll get 2 treasures in combat right off the bat.
Yeah, I see that. Um, cool. So yeah, I think that'll do it for our intro. You want to take this first question, Samurai?
Actually, I would like to little expand upon Conartistry's intro. So there are a couple of other players that play Malcolm Bruce, uh, and have gotten tournament results. The reason we picked Mr. Khan here is because he's basically the one who updates the primer the most,
Oh, okay.
and for most of the Malcolm decks, actually, he's very good at updating them, uh, keeping them relevant, and we know him on the Discord because we talk. He's one that like a lot of us used to be on Mox Amber or on Mox Opal, and he was like, "Well, that's not exactly where you want to be because you're only going to get it after you've already made treasures. So, at that point, do you want to be wasting a card on making more mana? I mean, so he's probably one of the best pioneers for Malcolm. Uh, so I think if anybody who has ever been on this show, he can answer this question the best. Why play this deck?
Well, first, thanks for all of that. I spend way too much time building this deck specifically. But for why play Malcolm Bruce, the big reason I came up with was after playing Malcolm Caddis for a long time, I realized that there was just a ton of, well, your commanders to a point of if you lost them, you were just out of the game. So I looked for a third color to add to try and fix some of the stability issues with the deck, and ended up on well, Jeskai, mostly for the intuition lines. And that's really what I leaned into the most with this is while you have like Grixis Malcolm will go a little bit faster and has other lines available to it, or Tropical Malcolm does the one thing really, really well.
Hmm.
Jeskai Malcolm is probably the best mid-range list for Malcolm by a decent amount, if for no other reason than being able to leverage the mana to get your draw engines out without completely dying should you lose Malcolm.
Okay. So you're saying this specific color combo uh, gives you a bit more in the mid range.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it because the other ones undoubtedly go faster. This one just plays the long game a little better.
So
Yeah.
for those listening at home, this is Malcolm's blue partner and Bruse Tarl is red white. So that's going to make this deck an Jeskai deck.
I would say that this speed is right on par with like Malcolm Tana at the moment. But whereas Malcolm Tana is just slow because it builds up on creatures, this deck is a little bit slower than like Malcolm Kedis or Malcolm File Smasher because it's actually trying to draw more cards before it goes for the win and
Hmm.
basically do a stabilized win. And then Malcolm Timna is just trying to make the opponent off themselves, just period.
Yeah, you just play stacks and control, right, with Malcolm Timna.
Yeah, it's just an attrition game with that deck. You're not really trying to win. You're just trying to make your opponents wish you had.
Yeah, unfortunately, Esper Malcolm is the one list where I truly do not understand what they're doing.
Okay. Well, cool. So what is your game plan or general strategy with this deck?
Well, for starters, the game plan is the same as every other Malcolm deck. You mulligan really aggressively for some kind of way to play Malcolm on turn one and
Hmm.
some kind of draw engine. And that is pretty much the entirety of what dictates a keepable hand.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after you play your turn one Malcolm, the goal is to just play whatever draw engines you got into and either chain into more draw engines or otherwise to maintain control of the board as you kind of snowball into your end game with either Spellseeker stuff, which I'll get to in a minute, or even occasionally Glinthorn wins.
Yeah. This. Yeah. Very very classic. This is definitely similar to the game plans for a lot of decks. Just in general, like yeah, we want to land those draw engines. Cool. Yeah. So I guess the next question, if you want to grab it.
Yep, I got you, man. Sorry, this is one of the few questions where I'm like, oh, I already know this answer inside out for one of these decks for once. So I've never understood this. How does this deck combo slash win?
Well, it's a good thing you asked.
Very inexperienced with this.
Indeed. So I'm actually going to start with the most. I'm going to go with both the most and least well known. It's also the least common line I end up with, and that's just your classic Malcolm plus Glinthorn Buccaneer combo. So because of the way Glinthorn Buccaneer is written, it's 2 red, it's got haste, and whenever you discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then he's got, for 1 and a red and discarding a card, you draw a card. You can only activate this when Glinthorn is attacking, but that rarely actually matters. Because of the way Malcolm is written, he'll every time you discard a card to Glinthorn's ability, he'll deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you'll generate 3 treasures for you to then be able to activate Glinthorn's ability again and ping everyone for 3 more damage and get 3 more treasures. And you can keep doing this either to filter your deck into putting together a different win condition if for some reason the damage isn't enough to close out a game, or you can just do it until everyone is dead from being pinged until, well, they run out of life. So that's the Glinthorn combo. Then you have the more streamlined or the more mainline version for wins that I go for, which would be Underworld Breach combos. You just play Underworld Breach, which is 1 and a red for an enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus 3 other cards from your graveyard. So that just means every time you cast it from your graveyard, you have to exile 3 cards. And then you play Underworld Breach, then you pair that with Lion's Eye Diamond, which is 0 and has sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond, discard your hand, add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool, and you pair that again with Freeze, which is quite simply just 1 and a blue for an instant, target player mills 3 cards, and it has Storm. So every time you cast it, you'll get more and more copies of Brain Freeze on the stack until you can just mill huge chunks of your own library to just keep building Storm and build up your own momentum as you get access to more counters and silence and everything as you're going. And then while some lists will run Thassa's Oracle and just win by decking themselves and playing Thoracle, I think that's a terrible plan without black. It's just such a dead card. So instead, what I've been doing is I've actually been winning with Fairy Mastermind, where you mill everyone else, and then Mastermind is 1 and a blue. He's got Flash and Flying, and 2 the different really relevant abilities. First, he's got whenever an opponent draws their second card in a turn, you draw a card, which is really nice for just keeping up with all the draw engines in the game right now. And then the way he actually closes a game is for 3 and a blue, you can make each player draw a card. Since everyone else will be on an empty library, you just win on the spot.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Death by Greed.
So
What
what?
is it? I've been a big fan of Very Mastermind, but I really dislike him recently because that's been my rare in like 5 of the last times I've gotten that after that invasion or whatever pack.
It's a
It's
really
like
good card. I like that card a lot.
he's cool,
Um,
but like get
I'm
tired of
running that
him.
card in my deck right now, at least. Um,
Ooh.
anyway, let's talk about Spellseeker because I know there's a line with this. So Spellseeker is 2 and a blue for a human wizard, 1/1. When it ETBs, you can search your library for instant and sorcery with mana value 2 or less, and then put it into your hand. So there's a way to just win with this card. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. First, I'm going to go on a slight detour and just shout out 2 cards that exist entirely to fetch Spellseeker, because
Yeah.
who doesn't love tutoring for tutors? And that's Step Through and Vidalcan Ether Mage. Both of them have a bunch of text on them that doesn't matter, and they both have wizard cycling. So you can just discard it at instant speed and grab Spellseeker. And then from there you go into the combo line, which would be hold on.
Oh, I got you if you don't remember it off the top of your head.
I know this line too.
I
Yeah.
am drawing a little bit of a blank. Give me
I
just a
got you,
moment.
man.
All right, I
It starts
found
with
it.
Ephemerate.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
I
give you a
got
hint.
it. There
Okay.
we go. So you start your line Seeker, you resolve the first end of the battlefield effect. You'll go fetch Ephemerate, which is 1 white for an instant. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and then it has Rebound. So you can recast it, which you will in a minute. You tutor after you cast after you cast Ephemerate, you fetch Enlighten Tutor by flickering Spellseeker again. No, I've
No.
missed. No, I've missed it. Oh no.
Yeah, you
One
okay.
moment.
You ephemerate Spellseeker and then you grab Final Fortune.
Final Fortune.
Yes, and then on the rebounded Ephemerate, you fetch
Mhm.
Enlightened Tutor.
Yeah.
I missed a step.
For the breach.
For
Yeah.
Breach. Yeah. So
Which you can then use to get Ephemerate back to get back Brain Freeze to hand.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
you can
then,
also
so
there's stuff you can do.
yeah, it's a weird chain. It's one of those moments where like I can do it when I'm playing, but to actually explain it is just taking a minute. So
100%.
you'll play Spellseeker, fetch Ephemerate, and then you Ephemerate the Spellseeker to fetch Final Fortune.
Right.
Then you'll take your extra turn, and in your upkeep, you'll flicker Spellseeker again and fetch Enlighten Tutor. Before your draw step, so still in your upkeep, you're going to cast Enlighten Tutor to fetch Underworld Breach, and then you draw it for the turn. Once you resolve Underworld Breach, you're then able to escape Ephemerate and flicker Spellseeker again. Now, because Ephemerate wasn't cast from your hand, it actually doesn't go back to exile, it goes back to your graveyard.
Mhm.
There's some lines where this is important, where you might be able to grab like Silence or something. You can sometimes weave that in there. Then, after you resolve the Ephemerate to flicker the Spellseeker again, you go fetch Brain Freeze. And then before you resolve your before you cast your first copy of Brain Freeze, you're actually going to escape Enlighten Tutor again and to fetch Lion's Eye Diamond to put it on top of your library and then start milling yourself.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Perfect. Yeah. That's definitely how it works. We had who was it? Was it? I think it was
Dragon Farm.
Dracomancer. Yeah,
it
it
was
was
Dracomancer. Dragon
Dracomancer
Farm,
had was on this line as well. It was also another Jeskai deck, um, which is also pretty cool. But we won't get too deep into that. So why don't we talk a little bit about how this deck functions in the early game? So I know we already talked about like what you're looking to mulligan for. Like we're looking for fast Malcolm into a draw engine. But what else are we doing in the early game?
Honestly, that's about it. You're
Okay.
playing Malcolm. Yeah, no, you're turn 1, and then the following turns, you're you're pretty much just attacking to generate your mana and either play multiple draw engines or just start accruing enough value where if someone tries to get under you, you're able to stop them, and then just keep chugging until you hit the mid game.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just looking at Malcolm, I was thinking, okay, if that's your plan, it means you can run less lands. And I looked down at your land count, and it was at 26, and I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad my my thought process was correct there.
Now it is 27 depending on how you count Sink into Stupor.
Oh, okay. So you're on a normal amount of lands, like relatively. Then
Yeah, it feels really bad to be stuck on relying on the treasures for everything, because sometimes you either lose Malcolm and then you're just out, or you get bottlenecked on mana because you just need to hit those land drops for some of the more aggressive engines that I'm running.
Yeah, or some of the more mana intensive combos, like the Spellseeker line, which requires you to have the true, like if you're starting from 0 and just like 3 cards or something in yard, you need like a lot of colored mana, right?
Yeah, I did the math on this at one point. I think you need like 2 generic, 3 white, 2 red, and a blue in order to be able to resolve the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, some of it goes into another turn, which kind of muddies up the math a little bit because like Final Fortune just gives you back all your lands. But yeah, it is going to be a little color heavy, a little mana heavy as well.
Yeah, no, the refund is definitely a huge part of what makes that line possible. But even in your second turn, it's still something like 7 mana in order to resolve everything. Like, it is expensive.
Yeah.
This is one of those lines that I say, like, if you let someone keep their Grand Abolisher up a turn, you are an idiot. Because literally what that turn, if turn 1 you play Malcolm, like we just know that's how that works. Turn 2, you swing with Malcolm, you play Grand Abolisher. Turn 3, you swing with Malcolm, you play Spellseeker because you now have the mana for it, and the Spellseeker was the only thing you needed for that line to go off. For you to get every card involved in that line. So
Yeah, absolutely love one card combos.
it's like,
Yeah, and like these cards aren't the other parts of the Spellseeker combo. I wouldn't say are dead. And Line Tutor's in like every deck with white, pretty much. The Brain Freeze is just part of Breach combo. LED is part of Breach combo. The only card that like is a little bit like maybe less universally useful is Ephemerate, but even that has like some application um as very specific removal sometimes.
it's
Uh,
got 5 applications on it in this deck.
Yeah, you can flicker your own dockside too, right?
yeah, you can flicker
Dockside,
your own
Hero
dockside.
Recruiter, Kite Sail, Ranger Captain, and Phyrexian Metamorph.
Oh
In
wow.
addition, yeah, in addition to the obvious Spellseeker. These are all great targets for you because resetting your Phyrexian Metamorph is fun sometimes.
That is
Sometimes,
spicy.
yeah.
I mean, it has to be a
Uh,
creature, but yeah.
the Kite Sail, resetting your opponent's cards again. Pure Recruiter, getting your Dockside. Ranger Captain getting your Esper, Siren, or your Ragavan, or even Dockside just saying like, yeah, I'm gonna reset the Dockside.
Are
You,
you gonna
you
be
guys,
on Mockingbird? Uh Conartistry going forward?
I've been giving it a decent amount of thought, but I don't think I am, just because one of the biggest values of clones is being able to cheat mana costs on things.
Right.
Like, who doesn't love a 2 mana Atali?
2 mana
And
Tiddish.
even though you're able to even though you're able to fetch it with Ranger Captain, I just think actually needing to pay for the full cost of the spell and not being able to flicker it in any way because it cares about the amount of mana spent to cast it, I don't think it's actually that worthwhile here.
Okay. So why don't we move on? Um what are you doing in the mid game?
I'm mostly drawing cards. The yeah, towards the mid game, hopefully I've resolved at least one, sometimes two draw engines by then, and really I'm just looking to keep people from getting under my own ability to win, generate more mana, and just be able to play through either the Spellseeker line or use intuition to assemble Underworld Breach more directly. Because especially when you account for like the wizard cycling spells, it can get pretty mana intensive when I'm actually trying to win. One of the side effects of not running black is I just get to run all the terrible tutors instead.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's gonna be a little bit harder for you to like efficiently grab like Dockside or efficiently grab Breach. There's more hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah, the good
Mhm.
thing is that with the addition of white, I have a really clean intuition line using Savine's Reclamation and then Underworld Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond.
Yeah.
So that has been a fair number of I've won a fair number of games just going off of that. So much so that there's actually an older version of this list where I was running Merchant Scroll just to fetch intuition. It was
Yeah.
not very good.
No.
I think where this deck really shines with the white is the fact that you get to run Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain, and Silence.
Yes. Between those
Just-
three and Savine's Reclamation, that's all I really needed to get out of running that third color.
And then you get to get Esper Sentinel, you get to run Trouble in Paris. You get a little bit more extra draw and a little bit more stability as you go through your combo.
Yeah. And as far as the card draw engines, back on the mid-range side of things, I am running a couple of odd ones that I count as being card advantage, but really they're just really mediocre tutors to go fetch Mystic Remora, and that's Dizzy Spell, which is a blue for an instant that does something, but it has transmute for 1 and 2 blue, so I can discard it and search for a 1 CMC spell, namely Mr. Cremora, because 4 mana fish is better than most of everything else you can do in this game.
Right. Okay. Uh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of stuff in here that just draws cards. Like just looking at your creature package, uh, Esper, Archivist, Fairy, Polywog, the new card, um, and Niv Mizzet, on top of even maybe the clones. So you are on actually a lot of draw engines here. Um, okay, so why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in the late game? So I know this deck's a bit more focused on the mid range. Would you say it's a bit more difficult for your deck when you get to the late game? I imagine maybe that's the case, because neither of these commanders provide value outside of mana. Oh, and also being a combo outlet, maybe. So yeah, what do you think about how this does in the late game?
I think I think the late game is determined entirely on how well the early game went for this deck.
Okay.
If I successfully got that turn 1 Malcolm and I resolved a draw engine and it didn't just turn into a sad cantrip or something, then generally I can go into the late game fairly well and not looking to stay I'm not looking to let a game go too long because the deck definitely does taper off after the latter half of the mid game. So I'm
Hmm.
looking to close it by the time we're getting to the late game. I say late game, that's like what, turn 5 or so? Yeah, so I'm hoping to close the game before we really get there, because a lot of the draw engines and everything just need to get set up early to do enough. And as you said, the commanders really don't provide that much if they don't start. If I don't get them started early. So it can struggle. I've definitely had some rough games against the likes of Tivit and Sisse where they want to go later, or at least they're more capable of it.
Hmm.
And I'll just run out of gas, and they'll keep going with their ridiculous draw engines or tutor on a stick type stuff.
Okay.
Track. So I guess the next question is, uh, so we know how it's early, mid game, late game, and you just talked about some issues you might have in the late game. Like, what are the strengths of your deck? What like what are your strongest moments in the deck? Like strongest matchups, strongest plays.
Strongest plays from keeping it to a generic mulligan, so just turn 1 Malcolm and then any of the draw engines. The strongest plays I've had through through the deck so far are really your turns 1 through 3 can get very snowbally very quickly, where if you resolve Malcolm and then on the second turn you either just cast Bruce and then a draw engine after combat, or you just play a draw engine and you just get yourself established early, it's really not too hard to ride that through the rest of the game and to at least be able to compete and, in my experience, mostly beat other mid-range decks before they can fully get themselves put together.
Makes sense.
Okay. Um, what would you say are this deck's weaknesses?
If Malcolm dies turn 1, you're in serious trouble. That is, you spend so many resources getting him out, and then if he just dies immediately, it's bad. The good thing is that for the most part, people are greedy, and killing a glorified birds of paradise really isn't that high on most people's lists. So it doesn't come up too much, but it definitely hurts when it happens. Besides that, I think is just the fact that you don't have draw in the command zone, so you do have to mulligan for some kind of draw, and you need it to work. So if you play an Archivist of Ogma, which I'm still very lukewarm on myself, if you play an Archivist and then one person tutors for the next 3 turns, you are not going to be having a good time.
Right. Right. Okay. So you're saying this deck is a bit more reliant on draw engines than most, because our commander is giving us the mana we need, but not the value. Like for example, even something like Pantlaza, which we had on the show a bit ago, um, the Dino actually does give you a lot of value, like in the mid to late game, because you'll cast him out, you'll get Discover 5, and then later on you can play another dinosaur and get some more value off of him. But yeah, this deck, it's like, when you really need stuff, you're just getting treasures, and I can see how that can be pretty rough.
Yeah, I've definitely fallen into the trap where I have a hand that looks really good and go, oh, I just need to draw any kind of draw engine and then I'm set. And then I'll spend the rest of the game sitting on about 37 treasures and do nothing for the rest of it.
Yeah, you just feed someone else's dockside, or like someone plays it and you're like, oh crap, now I gotta crack all these treasures, and you're back to like square zero, and it's like turn 5. I can see that happening. Yeah.
Say square
Right.
0, more like square -1.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten so bad where, so Cephalid Coliseum, usually people think of it as a way to kind of just kind of gotcha other people playing Thoracle Consultation. I
Right.
have very much had to use this thing as a draw engine to try and dig myself out of a hole.
I see. So when you're getting flooded with, like, I don't know, just like mana rocks and lands and stuff, and just interaction you don't really care about, you want to cephalid yourself and just try to get back into the game.
Yeah, I've definitely I've run into situations where my hand will be nothing but counter spells,
Hmm.
so I'll start just burning them to hit threshold, and then I'll hit myself with it just to try and dig a little deeper and find some kind of card draw engine or something to keep me in the game.
Right.
Because if nothing else, Colosseum enables my own breach combos, so worst
Right.
case scenario, it's still pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worst case scenario, it's still mill 3.
Right.
Yeah, like I could maybe see this deck considering. Um, I don't know. I was thinking about DRC, but I was like, that card's just too. It doesn't really give you value either, and that's one of the things that you're looking for the most with this deck, right?
Yeah, with Dragon Rage Channeler, I know there's some other lists trying it out, but the problem I found is we don't actually cast that many spells.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Yeah, you're not like a storm deck. Is more mid range where you're kind of chilling for a bit, and you're on 20 creatures, which is a lot. So it's like the chances of you drawing into gas. I mean, you're on like one Rite of Flame, right? And Dockside. I mean, you're on a decent amount of artifacts, but even that seems low, I think, compared to what I have in my deck. So I can definitely see, like, yeah, that sort of effect not getting much value here.
Yeah, a lot of the reason why I'm not on too many of the normal mana rocks, like the talismans or
Hmm.
Felwar Stone, is actually going back to something Samurai said earlier. They just don't help you get turn one Malcolm, and by the
Yeah.
time you have Malcolm, you just don't need them as much.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's Mana Vault even is a little bit arguable that it's, I would say, in this deck, because like I guess it helps you get out of turn 2, Malcolm.
So, Mana Vault's a weird one, but the big advantage it has, it's actually very similar to Rite of Flame,
Yeah.
where you pair it with another of the mana rocks, and that's how you get your turn one Malcolm out of it.
Oh,
I'd
I
say
see.
Mana Vault has one good thing that it does in this deck and in every deck is it might not be like the best at getting a turn 1 Malcolm, but it's definitely the best at getting a turn 1 Ring.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was like thinking, I was like, what do you ramp out? Yeah, it's like you can use it to cheat out like Ring and Metamorph.
Use it for the Arcane Signet
Yeah,
with
you can
another
also
rock.
use it for the rocks or like Soul Ring, and you can. I guess you wouldn't do it in that order, but yeah, I can see it. There's like a few applications for it, but no, I don't think it's wrong.
Mhm.
But if you're looking to be a bit more, I don't know, your bow, you could
Cons,
swap it.
yeah, Con's also on Grinding Station, so mana positive rocks will always be necessary.
Yeah, 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 because you want to do the whole like mana crypt thing, and you're trying to go positive, mana positive. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, why are you on grinding station, by the way, instead of just something else in that slot?
Because the deck is very So I'm running Glinthorn Buccaneer. I have the Curiosity combo for Niv Mizzet stuff, but really the deck is at its core a breach deck. And
Right.
I wanted to run anything that I could remotely justify getting that online and being able to produce a win from it. And Grinding Station works really well here, both for turning those mana positive rocks or mana neutral rocks into just digging for brain freeze. It also works with, so I discovered a really funny line. I don't remember who first mentioned it to me, but Grinding Station plus Dockside Extortionist with
Hmm.
Ephemerate and Underworld Breach can be used to mill people out of the game because you keep escaping the Ephemerate and
Right.
you flicker Dockside, get a whole bunch of mill triggers, mill yourself once or twice, and then mill somebody else for the rest of the treasures. And it's really goofy.
No, I like that. That's great. I had not thought about that before. I was thinking like, okay, yeah, you get well, wouldn't ephemerate go to exile on the first cast?
It would not, because Rebound specifically wants you to cast it from your hand for it
Oh,
to go to
okay.
exile. So it'll just keep hitting your graveyard over and over again and let you
That's
put this ridiculous line together.
Mhm.
that's really funny. Um my god. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I get it. I mean, yeah, in a breach deck, grinding station can only be so bad. It's also going to mess with our opponent's top deck tutors too, right? So for those that don't know, grinding station is a 2 mana artifact with tap sack an artifact, target player mills 3, and whenever an artifact comes into play, you can untap it. Something interesting about this card is when you play it and it resolves and it enters the battlefield, you actually get a trigger because it's an artifact that entered the battlefild, and you get an untap trigger.
I actually didn't know that.
Cool, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
grinding station's always positive 1 mil because it ETBs and untaps itself.
that's fantastic. So I guess this is just another thing that gets around blind obedience then.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. Like if you're pairing this with LED, also it does. Okay. Um, cool. So next up, would you have any tips for players that are new to maybe not the game, but new to this deck?
Oh wow. Him having tips for people that are new to this deck? No, no. Con
Hmm.
Con would never have that.
No, that's definitely not what most of the messages I send are anymore. For this deck specifically, I would say actually it's the same for every Malcolm deck. Mulligan for turn 1 Malcolm, and you need some kind of draw engine or your hand just is not keepable. I don't think, besides Timna, which that really understand anyway. I don't think there's really an exception to that where any Malcolm deck, you just need that draw engine in your opening hand, or you're risking just completely shutting yourself out of the game with a bunch of mana and nothing to do. So that's the number one piece of advice I would give is just you need early Malcolm and you
Mm-hmm.
absolutely have to have a draw engine.
You need a turn 1 advantage engine, period. Like
Right.
Yes.
it's gotta be something else.
Yeah, you want to try to get under your opponents a little bit in that regard. Okay. And I notice we
Uh
have a cat now as well.
yeah, she was clawing into my leg. So I'm looking at this list. I got a question, Con. Uh what are some like overlooked cards like the hidden sauce?
Well, I've mentioned one already, and that's Dizzy Spell, which is
Oh,
just it's 1 blue. It doesn't really matter what it does outside of being 1 blue, and it has Transmute. So Transmute lets you just discard it and search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as the card that you transmuted. So the ideal play pattern with that is just you turn 1 Malcolm, you get your treasure, and then turn 2 you have about 4 mana ideally, where you can transmute Dizzy Spell to fetch Mystic Remora, and then
yes.
just cast that and have your draw engine that way. So that's one, and then the other ones I think are more unique to this list, or otherwise pulled straight from Manala, are Vidalcan Ether Mage with Wizard Cycling for 3 generic, and Step Through with Wizard Cycling for 2 generic mana, as just ways to fetch Spellseeker.
Um
The other one that actually Samurai, I have to credit you with this one, is Fault Line.
Yeah.
It is very good into the creature heavy, everything's on the ground, but everyone's playing value 1/1s or 2/1s or 1/2s, whatever they are. Fault Line is just devastating for a lot of decks. It's X and 2 red for an instant. Fault Line deals X damage to each creature without flying and each player. Because Malcolm has flying, this is a one-sided board wipe. It is fantastic.
Yeah,
Have you used it on
the
a log
only
player yet?
downside I can see with this card is it doesn't hurt Nadu as much as you'd like it to.
It
Not as much
doesn't
as you'd
hurt
like
as
to.
much, like, it leaves Nadu around, but it will wipe out every still
Right.
at least passable in that situation.
Yeah, so, like, once they go to, untap with, a Fetto or Seeker Sidebreak or something, you can then cast your Fault Line and take it out.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if they're going for Scoot Mob or Scoot Swarm. Which one is it? Scoot Mob or Scoot Swarm? I always
Good
forget.
swarm.
Swarm, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Swarm.
Or Nantuka Springheart, yeah.
Right, but with
Mhm.
either of those, once they resolve that, before they do anything else, you can just fault line and get rid of everything they were doing, no matter where they were in their line. It's
Yeah.
effective.
Well, you gotta get
Also,
priority, I mean, technically, they get to do something first and get, like, 1 Nadu trigger at the minimum, but,
True.
yeah, I mean, it's
it
killing
also
it, which should be good enough, right?
it's also pretty good in one other facet that I found people forget. Ad Naz players, resets their math on their Ad Naz.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you oh, no. No, God, I didn't read that last bit on it. Each player,
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh
I have actually successfully, so before I added fault line, I was running Earthquake. I successfully killed someone in a tournament with Earthquake for X equals 5.
oh my god. Okay. Oh, I wanted to ask you. So I noticed you're on Sink into Stupor. How has that been for you?
It's been pretty good so far. It's a decent way of just it's another bounce spell. It's a way to get around the handful of uncounterable things. Like if someone has Cavern of Souls, you can still just bounce whatever it is they were doing. And it just makes some math a little bit harder, or someone will go all in for like an ad nause. You just bounce it to their hand. It's still there, but they're reset, so it hurts. It's not okay. As a spell, it's pretty underwhelming. As a land, it's phenomenal.
Right. So for those that don't know, Sink into Stupor is 1 in blue for an instant. Return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand, but it has a backside where it's a land, and as it ETBs, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, ETBs tapped. So it's a land when you want it to be. It just creates blue, so no multicolor stuff there. And then it's also a bounce spell, yeah, semi countery bounce spell that is
It's
stack
better
interaction.
unsubstantiate.
Yeah, it is based. Yeah, exactly. It's better uh, unsubstantiate with one more colored pip there. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I think we should maybe mention here. There were a couple of the creatures that I was interested in.
Mhm.
So one of them being Kitesail Larcenist. So 2 in the blue for a human pirate, flying in Ward 1. When it ETBs for each player, choose up to one other target artifact or creature that player controls. As long as Kitesail Larcenist is on the battlefield, the chosen permanents are treasure artifacts with they turn into treasures. To tap sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, and they lose all other abilities. Uh, and then the other one I was interested in was Niv Mizzet Perun. So triple blue, triple red pips for a dragon wizard 5/5. Can't be countered, flying. Whenever you draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Um, so I just want to go really quick into Niv Mizzet. I was looking earlier at your enchantments and I was trying to figure out why you were on combat research and curiosity, but I think maybe that answers that question.
Mm,
So kind of. It'll combo with Curiosity, but really the reason I'm running Niv Mizzet is because he is a game warping draw engine. When he resolves, and thanks to Uncounterable, he will resolve, the game absolutely bends around him because
Yeah.
there are very few things people can do without feeding you a bunch of cards and letting you just destroy the board. So he's there completely separate from any kind of combo or synergy that there happens to be here. As far as curiosity and combat research go, both of them are actually here completely separately from Niv Mizzet. Combat research doesn't work with Niv Mizzet anyways because it's only on combat damage, but both of them are actually intended to be put on Malcolm, and then when you give him double strike with Bruse, you get to draw 2 cards per combat instead of just
Ah,
1.
I see. Okay. And just curiosity just happens to go infinite with Niv Mizzet, so like both of
Right.
these like, combat research doesn't, but curiosity does. So you might as well run it and have it be both a value piece and a combo
Right. It's one of
piece.
those things where both cards are perfect for the deck, and then they happen to combo when you put them together.
Right.
And then the other card that you mentioned was Kitesail Larcenist.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's very much an okay removal spell, but the best thing I've been getting from it really is being able to play it to like turn 1 Malcolm and then turn 2 playing Larcenist. It doesn't really matter what I'm hitting at that point because anything that I'm hitting that early on is going to affect someone's game plan.
Yeah.
And then it's just a second Pyre or treasures off of Malcolm for the mid game.
Yeah. This card is really good.
It
Um
has bonus synergy with Mana Vault. You can turn your tapped Mana Vault into a rock.
for each player. Oh, so you turn it into a okay, that's really cool. So you can also pick yourself. Wait a second. Hold on, I've got a question about this. So it says
Go for it.
when Kitesail Larcenist enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to one other target artifact creature that player controls. Oh, one other. I was gonna say, couldn't you just turn itself into a treasure and just sit there all game long? But no, you can't do that.
Thankfully not, no. Now, if you clone it, you can turn the original one to a treasure, and that doesn't actually void the rest of its ability.
Yeah,
Everything
that's
else
what
that
I
it
was
turned
gonna
into a treasure
say.
stays a treasure.
Yeah, it would still be Kitesail Larcenist. It would still be a permanent, um, like in Magic, right? Because like if
Mhm.
something refers to its own name, it's referring to itself as a permanent, regardless of what happens to it. So if it gets elked or something, it's still that permanent. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So anyway, okay, that's cool. Now I've played against this card. It's pretty nasty. Like it's like if people can't get rid of it, it's essentially a 3-for-1. Um, Yeah, I think it's pretty darn good, and it's even better because it has synergy with Malcolm, where if you can start swinging with it, right, you're just making a bunch of treasures.
Yeah, and being a 2/3 with flying, you're pretty regularly going to be able to get in somewhere.
I mean, honestly, you're this the creatures you have in here kind of look like just a pirate ship crew. Like there's all sorts of different like critters. There's a monkey. There's fairies, and I don't know. They all kind of come together to me. Just looking at it as some sort of like motley adventure crew, like One Piece. You got like a bunch of different people.
Right. And then
Okay.
I think there's one other creature I'd like to point out
Yeah.
just as something that has been overperforming for me, like miles better than I ever thought it would be in this deck, and that's Professional Facebreaker. The original idea
Yes.
was just that it's kind of a second Malcolm, where if I hit someone, I'll get another treasure for combat.
Hmm.
But the ability to dig, like I've run into situations where I would legitimately have like 20 treasures stacked up, nothing to do. So I just exile a huge chunk of my deck with that last ability and try and put something together.
Yeah, I used to run this card in Blue Farm, and when I did, I absolutely loved this card. That was when the meta was like a lot slower than it is now. Like I think what this was like a year ago, and it was really completely fine. For Blue Farm specifically, like this is a different deck,
Right.
right? It was totally good to like um just play out the Facebreaker turn 3. I mean, it sucks that it's taking your like Timna turn, right? But and then it was just great for the rest of the game because can't be blocked. It makes you treasures to play in your commander, and in a pinch, like if someone's like comboing off and you're really trying to find um a free counterspell or something, or like a counterspell. Um, I mean, granted, it's not like that reliable at getting those, but it does come up sometimes.
I was gonna
Yeah,
wonder if you're gonna bring up professional facebreaker. I think on the Malcolm forum, isn't that like like a lot of the new players always ask, do we like they ask what should we add, and this is the one card that's like this is it's like a $7 card. It's the biggest power spike in Malcolm you can get for the most part
It's
for
so
that amount
good.
of money.
I love that
yeah,
card.
yeah. For just any old Malcolm list, I think Facebreaker is one of the best cards you could add. A lot of those questions end up being for Malcolm Kedis, though, where I think the single best card you could add is Consecrated Sphinx, but that is a separate conversation entirely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
why is it Sphinx in this deck?
Because
you
it's
don't
six
make six
mana and
treasures.
you can counter it.
Yep.
Fair. Niv Mizzet is 6 mana, but you can't count it. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Malcolm Kedis, you make 3 treasures a turn. Sphinx represents like 2 turns. In Malcolm Bruce, Sphinx represents 4 turns.
Yeah, and also Sphinx doesn't combo like Niv
Hmm.
Mizzet does with a card that's just generically good in the deck with Curiosity.
Right. And as much as Sphinx is another card that like it will warp the game around it because it's a must answer card, it's also much easier to answer than Niv Mizzet, and I didn't want too many top end things like that because if I'm using my treasures on stuff like that, then I don't have them stockpiled for the Spellseeker line, and it's a little bit of a balance of when things are going well, sometimes your margins get a little thin, so you need to
Hmm.
be really particular with how you're using your mana.
What do you think about the new 1 mana bounce spell? So I see you're on Archimist, not Archivist, Alchemist's Retrieval, which is 1 blue for. So if you cast it for 1 blue, you return target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. But it also has a cleave cost, so you can pay 1 and a blue, so 2 mana, and then you can return any target non-land permanent to its owner's hand.
Right. So you're asking what I think about the new bounce spell compared to Alchemist Retrieval?
Right. So like the difference between those two. So the new bounce spell is you pay 1 mana to bounce a creature, or you can give someone a 1/1 fish, and then you can bounce any non-land permanent, and that's all for 1 mana. Um, so yeah, the difference being that's you don't care. We don't really care about the fish, right? So the difference is we can pay 1 mana to only target opponent stuff, or with Alchemist Retrieval, we can either pay 1 mana to bounce one of our stuff or 2 mana to bounce an opponent's thing. Yeah, I just wanted to pick your brains a little bit, see what your thoughts were on that card.
Right. So I know a lot of people seem to be pretty optimistic about it, but in
Hmm.
here specifically, like there's enough cases of either resetting my own Phyrexian Metamorph or resetting Dockside or getting another enter the battlefield effect from like Imperial Recruiter or Spellseeker if I had to go fetch something else. I think the ability to target my own stuff it puts retrieval way well and above anything that the new bounce spell can do because hitting other people's stuff, while useful, really isn't the reason I'm running it.
Have you considered Snap in this slot?
So I used to run Snap, but I
Hmm.
ran into the issue of not being able to bounce non-land permanents when I needed to.
Right.
Someone resolved Rule of Law right after I made that switch, and
Oh no.
yeah, that was
Hmm.
rough.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, I don't like Snap. A lot of Blue Farm lists used to be on Snap, and I can see why. Right, like it's essentially a free, quote, free bounce spell. And you still have to have the mana up front. But yeah,
It's
it
a
doesn't hit so many things that like you'd want it to hit. Like it doesn't hit breach. It doesn't hit like yeah, a rule of law is a good example. It doesn't hit artifacts and enchantments. Sometimes you want to get rid of like weird stuff like planeswalkers and because like the non-land permanent removal hits not just non-land permanents but creatures too. So it's yeah,
Yeah,
just as
that extra
good.
flexibility is really helpful, and
Yeah.
then yeah, it's either I can reset my own things if I need to, or it's just blanket remove something before I try and win. The other card that's like that that I'd like to just mention real quick because it's a little bit odd to me that I'm even running it, to be honest, is Touch the Spirit Realm. This is another card that's just way better than I thought it would be because
Yes.
Channel isn't casting the spell, so you can just get around anything and
Yes.
lose something for a turn.
So for those that don't know, Touch the Spirit Realm is 2 and a white for an enchantment. So 3 mana total. When it ETBs up to exile up to one target artifact or creature until it leaves the battlefield. But what we're really using it for is this channel ability where we can pay 1 and a white and discard it, exile target artifact or creature, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So I mean, I run this card in my deck right now in Blue Farm. Um, and yeah, this card's just so good because it deals with it can stop Sisay, um, because they're just spinning stuff, and you're like, okay. And if they have like a bunch of counter spells, you can just touch Spirit Realm. As you said, channel's not a cast; it's just an ability. The only thing that really stops it is like deflecting SWAT, right?
Yeah,
Um,
swats or trick binds, like
Trick by, yeah, and then
yeah.
like, is there another SWAT like ability? There's probably a few more SWAT like things that might get it.
You could always
Um,
get hit by a spell skite.
Spell Skite too, yeah, if they can, if you're not paying attention. Um, yeah, this card's really good. I mean, the best use of it is like someone resolves an abolisher, and then that you just touch the abolisher, right?
Yeah, that's the dream. That's why it's in here. Someone resolves their Grand Abolisher, they windmill slam their win con. You have the counter magic for it. You channel and you exile the Abolisher, delete their win con, and then
Mm,
let the Abolisher come back when it no longer matters.
yeah, correct. But cool. Guess we'll take a quick look at your land, see if I notice anything unusual. No, it's like fairly standard disc stuff. There's the Fiery Islet, which I think is cool. Which is a land that you can tap, pay life, add blue or red, and you can pay one and crack the land and draw one card.
I am also running Sunbaked Canyon because I'm just
Ah,
so desperate for the card draw that even my lands have to be providing some kind of advantage there.
I think you might, if that's how it is, I think you might be interested in one Surveil land, maybe.
I'm on Thundering Falls already.
Oh, you are? I did not see that.
I
My apologies. Where is Thundering Falls? PQRS. Oh, that's okay. I see. Okay, I looked at this art and then my brain was like, oh, that's Steam Vents, but no, Steam. My bad. My bad. No, yeah. Yeah. How are you liking the Surveillance?
I'm actually liking them a lot more than I thought I would. So I
Yeah.
very much started as a hater on these things and agreed to try it, expecting the worst. And then after actually playing it, I'm pretty regularly fetching it and getting that extra surveil, which, while it isn't much when we're this strapped for card advantage and every draw counts, it's really nice to be able to just take that land that you don't need and just put it into your graveyard.
Yeah. For sure.
Especially because you can, use fetches and do it on end steps. That's the whole reason you play these things.
Right. Right. Yeah. You untap into your next turn.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the fetches to get to the surveillance. Definitely everybody. I feel like everybody we had a collective like, oh, like yeah, I guess that was an option.
Yeah, I was just worried that it was going to be too much of a momentum drain to just hold that fetch up when I want those turn 1 plays like I was talking about,
Right.
but in practice, you can totally just fetch this thing on turn 2 or even just later if you did have a solid opening and you're in the mid game now and you just have another fetch, like, it's at least decent in most situations.
Yeah.
Decent in most situations. That was my yearbook quote.
All right. You got anything else for us, Samurai? You can think of?
No, he's basically covered it. I like he knows that I have certain like what's the term opinions about certain removal options, but that is what it is. We call them flex spots for a reason. Uh,
Yeah.
when it comes to like Jeskai, I'm not big on Dauntless Dismantler over what is it called? Uh the Blind Obedience. I'm a bigger fan of Blind Obedience. I understand the Dauntless. It's just one of those cards that I'm like, it's never felt good. But
Right.
I
That's
understand it
fair.
in your deck, because it is like, you don't actually care that much. You will have excess treasures, so popping people's rocks actually makes sense. Uh, It all kind of made sense. I'm bigger on Flesh Duplicate, but I assume because you're like 3 colors, the 2 blue pips, it's a little bit rougher.
Yeah, and like the difference between Phantasmal Image and Flesh Duplicate is pretty negligible, anyways. Like I could easily see it just being one over the other. I just picked one arbitrarily because
Mhm.
one is easier to cast, the other one sticks around longer.
That
Yeah.
checks.
Okay, cool. Was there anything else you'd like to talk about with this deck? Or maybe any shout outs you'd like to give out to, say, a local shop or some friends or people, a Discord maybe, some people that helped you build this? Anything like that?
Well, I can't shout out to anyone like, in particular for that. Most of the Bruce channel in the Malcolm Discord server is me just comparing like four different cards over and over
Mm,
again ad infinitum. So, shout out to whomever's listening to my ravings about this deck. The only other card that I can think is worth really mention because it's a fairly new edition, and the entire reason it's here is it is the same idea as Dizzy Spell. It's a 4 mana Mystic Remora, and
you
four
cut
mana
out
fish is
first.
good.
You cut out for a
Sorry.
second. What was the card? Sorry?
Idyllic Tutor.
Oh, Idyllic Tutor. Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah, I was looking at that too. I forgot to bring it up, but yeah. So Idyllic Tutor is 2 and a white for sorcery. Search your library for an enchantment card, put it into your hand, and shuffle. So yeah, this is just a 4 mana or more on this deck. You said.
Yeah, and you're able to fetch other things like Underworld Breach
Yeah.
if you have the rest of your combo already,
Hmm.
or even Rhystic Study if you're just sitting on a whole bunch of mana. But plan A with Idyllic Tutor is just fetching fish and rolling with that.
Yeah, there's actually you have a lot of decent targets. I guess usually you're not wanting Dress Down, but you have Trouble in Pairs, Ristic, Remora, even Curiosity, and like you can get Breach. So yeah, Idyllic Tutor actually makes a lot of sense. The only problem with it being a little bit mana intensive there.
Yeah, but hey, that's what the deck does, is make a whole bunch
Right.
of mana, so I may as well lean into that.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, we've got one last thing. So we have this very very patented. We have to say that it's a legal disclaimer, so our very revolutionary idea here doesn't get stolen by every other channel. It's the spicy scale. Yeah. So the spicy scale goes from 0 Scoville units, which is a bell pepper, so not spicy at all the way up to Carolina Reaper, which is 2 million Scoville units. So we'd like to ask you, how spicy would you rate your deck on a scale of 0 to 2 million? And
Hmm.
the middle point here is about, it goes up pretty fast. So it goes from like 15,000 with Jamaican Bell all the way up pretty quickly to Habanero Chocolate at 500K. So I don't know. Why don't you take a look at it? It should be in that document I sent you, and let us know what you think.
As much as I want to say the deck is cooler than it is, I think it's pretty fair to say it'd only be around like a 4 or 5,000 or so, because it is a pretty standard Jeskai list, just leveraging the mana production of Malcolm to smooth over a lot of the normal problems those sorts of decks run into.
What do you think, Samurai?
Yeah, that's how I define it. It's kinda like a jalapeno. It's, the commander is what makes it spicy to begin with, but because it falls off so fast on that, it's like it doesn't really hit harder on the pirate synergies. It's kinda
Hmm.
like, "Oh, well, little heat, and then it's nothing."
Yeah, I would put it fairly low as well on like meta breaking spiciness. I would say it's yeah, between like jalapeno, maybe Anaheim chili, like somewhere in, let's say I'll give it an Anaheim chili. Uh really just cuz I'm looking through this list, and like this feels very familiar to me, like a lot of the card, maybe it's cuz I watched Dragonstorm. But the way this deck plays is going to be very similar to the deck that I play, which is which is Blue Farm, and that's not spicy at all.
That's about as vanilla as you can get. Of
Yeah.
course,
Um.
there is a reason for that, and
That's a salsa everyone can enjoy.
right.
Yeah.
But as far as the list playing a lot like Blue Farm, there is a reason to that, and that's because I did draw a lot of inspiration from Blue Farm just for figuring out what card advantage engines were really worth running and kind of narrowing down some of the better options for interaction and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not like, I mean, it's. I don't know if it's exactly correct to say this is just a version of Blue Farm, because it's certainly not. I think it's more like that Blue Farm runs so many of like the people behind Blue Farm are some of like the best minds in cEDH, right? And the deck has gone through so much testing and so many reps and so many people trying different things, um and it's kind of strained out like the less suboptimal cards, and that's had an impact on the rest of the meta too. And so it's just easier for people to see like what are the best cards. And on top of that, like the cards, like when they're being played, um people are just getting so much experience with them that like people are noticing. I don't know if I'm making sense, but uh I'm I'm saying like the cards that are in this deck are just, a lot of them are just good, like regardless of whether or not Blue Farm would even exist.
Yeah, and part of that's also because, as I said from the very beginning of all of this, I started with Malcolm Kedis, where if Malcolm died, the deck is done. You're not doing anything anymore. So I was looking to find ways to make it a little bit less reliant on the commander. But in doing that, I think I didn't really lose any of the effectiveness of it. If anything, I only gained that. But I
Hmm.
definitely lost some the unique cards that I could be running, but they really suck if you don't have Malcolm out, stuff like that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for Malcolm Bruce. Thank you very much, Conartistry, for coming on the podcast. On top of the amazing experience you've had here for this hour ish, you'll also get the off meta guest role in the Deck Check Discord. So your name will be a yellow one for as long as you would like to be in our little Discord.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I think that about wraps us up. Again, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, maybe send this to a friend. And with that, we will see you later.